While the bhren and comvin never signed an official treaty, never officially made peace, they were at least no longer actively fighting one another. All it had taken was the destruction of Earth, the planet of the humans, who had been the allies of the bhren. At least they thought that they were. While destroying a planet was the most grave of galactic taboos, and under normal circumstances the comvin could have expected the galaxy to turn against them, the humans had been uplifted by the bhren. As a result, few truly mourned their loss, not even the bhren themselves, whose indifference towards the humans, it could be argued, allowed for such a fate to befall their planet. Meanwhile, while a number of humans had managed to evacuate prior to the planet's destruction, the number amounted to less than 1/10 of those on the planet. Their species had suffered a devastating blow, and with all of their infrastructure wiped out, and not even a planet to call their home, they seemed destined for extinction, to fade into obscurity. As far as the rest of the galaxy was concerned, they were already forgotten, merely another extinct race. Fortune would hold that the galaxy should not have discounted them so quickly. 10 years after the destruction of Earth, comvin ships began reporting coming under attack by unknown enemies. Naturally, the bhren were suspected of being behind the attacks at first, even though they swore they knew nothing about them. Tensions only escalated when it was eventually revealed that the attackers were human, after one of the attacking ships was destroyed, and a member of its crew, though deceased, was located among the debris. It was believed that a race that had been so thoroughly decimated as the humans couldn't hope to attack the comvin's ships, not unless they had support. A state of wartime readiness was declared as the comvin prepared to move against the bhren in full, and the war between the two seemed to be on the verge of rekindling. However, something was odd about the humans' attacks. They were precise, yet their location was inconsistent. If the bhren were supporting them, then the attacks should be focused around their shared border. But over half of the attacks were coming from the opposite side of the comvin's territory. Did humanity find another planet? Did some other race decide to take them on as a patron, and were seeking to strategically weaken the comvin or goad them into a war with the bhren? The answer would come from the unlikeliest of places. Decades prior, a Gestar research drone had been sent to one of their nearby systems, as it was suspected that it might have a planet suitable for life. When it was discovered that it did not, the drone was put into standby mode and forgotten. Nearly a century later, the drone began sending messages again, images of a ragged but massive fleet descending on the system. They mined the asteroids, siphoned from the gas giants. Any and every possible resource was consumed. Some of the ships seen in the images were familiar. They looked like ones that had been involved in the attacks on the comvin's military and merchant ships. It seemed humanity hadn't found a new planet to call their own, nor a patron to support them. They instead traveled to a forgotten, uninhabited system and began exploiting its resources. Upon learning this, the comvin sent a fleet to the system, ignoring the Gestar's protests, who felt particularly indignant as they had willingly shared this information with the comvin. No one was ready for what they found, however. Having expected to find the human fleet, they instead found that the system was empty. The humans had been there. The comvin's survey confirmed that many of the asteroids had indeed been mined out using equipment consistent with those seen in the images provided by the Gestar. However, now they weren't. They had simply moved on. It was at this point that the galaxy realized that humanity had created a nomadic fleet, that they had become wanderers among the stars that no one believed them to be entitled to. The attacks on the comvin's ships continued, and the comvin vowed to hunt down this threat. One would think that, knowing the enemy is nomadic, knowing that it could strike from anywhere, the comvin would have shored up their defenses. However, the comvin's strategists instead decided to take an offensive approach. They would hunt down and destroy this wandering fleet, no matter where it was. With each new ship, convoy, station, and soon world attacked, the comvin committed more and more of their military to hunting the humans down. In doing so, they played right into humanity's hands. One day alerts went out. Enemy vessels sighted over Gata, the economic powerhouse of the comvin's nation. Gata had its own defensive fleet, of course, but as the comvin pulled more and more ships to search for humanity's nomadic fleet, this force grew smaller and smaller. On this day, what was left was swept aside. Not without great loss on the human side. Perhaps more than was necessary had they been willing to take their time. But they brought more than enough ships to compensate. With the defense fleet annihilated, the human warships encircled Gotha, and what followed is hard to watch. What was done to Earth, we now return. This was the singular message sent out to the galaxy at large, prior to the bombardment. Gata briefly outshined Gatru, its host star, as thermonuclear hell rained down on its surface. The destruction was thorough. Not a single square inch was left unmarred by the terrible heat and pressure of the humans' weapons. The planet's inhabitants, all 1.1 trillion, were vaporized in an instant. The galaxy was outraged. A species planet had been decimated, all life purged from its surface. It was one of the greatest taboos among the galaxy, and many demanded war with the humans. The hypocrisy, that they were mostly silent when humanity's own world suffered an even worse fate, as eventually Gata would be capable of supporting life again. The weapons used by the humans resulting in relatively little fallout even with their excessive bombardment, while Earth could not, was ignored. All cried out for vengeance, many practically frothing at the mouth to spill human blood. That was when, as if on cue, another message arrived from the humans. It was a list of worlds of every member of the greater galactic community. It included their populations, points of strategic interest, and defenses. Where applicable, it even included defenses that were hidden, some of which were the best-kept secrets among the species in question. At the end of this list was a note that read, "We have plenty more." It quickly became clear that in the 10 years since humanity had disappeared from the galaxy's interest, they had not simply been idle. Nor had they devoted their efforts solely towards the construction of their nomadic fleet. While the rest of the galaxy ignored the humans, humanity had taken a keen interest in them. They studied the various races of the galaxy, and had done so quite thoroughly. And if their message was to be believed, they had built up quite the arsenal as well. Rather than merely accepting their slow extinction, they had been rebuilding, preparing. Despite how we had so readily written them off, humanity was not ready to go quietly into that good night. And they were about to get very loud.